I'm Stacey Skrysak. Most people know me from the news, and I've been doing it for a whole long time. You notice me with we call it the anchor helmet. I've got all the hairs in place today, the makeup on, and you see the smiling face or the very serious. We know what to do. We can separate ourselves from the news and real life. But I think that we all, as you've seen already on the stage, we all have our own struggles that people don't see. And for me, that struggle is grief. And a lot of it for over a decade now. So that's my story, and I hope that I can help some of you. When I was growing up in San Diego, it was a beautiful town. Can't live there because I can't afford to live there now. I love it here. It was a picture-perfect life. I grew up with a wonderful family. I lived by the beach with palm trees, and the only thing missing was that white picket fence. And that's kind of how life went for me. It just worked. Even when it didn't work, it always seemed like things were going to work out. I moved to the middle of nowhere, Podunk, Nebraska, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, a tiny little dot on the map, and met my husband there in my first job, and that was over 20 years ago. And we moved all over the country to kind of for my job. And that landed us here in Springfield. And I remember when we first moved here, everyone said, oh yeah, you're only gonna be here a couple years. I think Dawn, my co-anchor's in the crowd, who told me the same thing. So you say, you're gonna, yeah, we'll see. And here we are 13 years later, my husband and I are married with kids in suburbia, loving it. When we moved here, our plan, the next step, as I was gonna find my soulmate, we were gonna have kids and have the life we always wanted. But as so many couples find out, it doesn't always work that way. But for me, things always seem to work out. We dealt with infertility for years. And it wasn't until 2013 that we realized that really our only shot, because of my health, would be IVF. So we went through IVF and once again had that hope. And because nothing ever is normal with me, it was a 2 to 5% chance, but we ended up pregnant with triplets, 2 identical girls and a boy. And I remember being on the news and announcing it and kind of being nervous, going, please say prayers for us, because we know that this is gonna be a difficult pregnancy. So please, we'll take all of the prayers. But I still had that hope, and I still thought everything works out. At 18 weeks gestation, we almost lost the children. I started at just a doctor's appointment and ended up in emergency surgery and on bed rest for months after that. But we still had that hope, and the doctors were surprised, knowing, do you really understand what's going on? And we're like, yeah, we know, things work out for us. At 20 weeks gestation, which is just halfway through a pregnancy, my water broke. I was on bed rest, and we still had that hope. We thought, you know what? Things just work out. And unfortunately, 2 weeks later, at 22 weeks gestation, I went into labor. 17 weeks premature. And for people that aren't familiar, viability is not even really, it's that edge, it's kind of a gray area, 22 weeks. You want to get to 23, 24. Many hospitals won't even give a mother or babies a chance at that gestation, but we were prepared. The neonatal intensive care unit was ready for us at St. John's, and they delivered my children. On June 23rd at 4:58 a.m., our first daughter, Abigail, was born, and less than 2 hours later, she died in our arms. And we laid there thinking, wow, life is not going as planned. And we just kind of laid there all day going, okay, when's the other shoe gonna drop? 17 hours later, Abby's identical sister, Peyton, was born, and her son, Parker, were born. I was very sick, went into septic shock, and was rushed off to the operating room where they saved my life. I woke up hours later in the ICU, not even realizing that I had 2 children that were 1 pound each and translucent and barely alive in the NICU. And that started our journey of grief, but also trying to balance it out. Exactly a week after I delivered the triplets, we were released from the hospital. It happened to be the day that I got to hold our lone survivor, Peyton. I got to hold her for the first time. And as we left the hospital for the first time in months for me, we had to go straight to the funeral home. And we had to sit and pick out an urn and identify our daughter. And we sat there in our 30s thinking, we're kids, this is not right. You know, children are supposed to outlive their parents, not the other way around. We held a small service because this was all so sudden. Our family had flown in. And that day, my parents flew back to San Diego, my in-laws flew back to Nebraska, and the next day, my husband went back to work. And I was left at home trying to recover and also survive and just figure out how to live and how to stay strong for 2 little babies. 55 days after we delivered our triplets, we were in the same boat. On August 16th at 6:12 p.m., our son Parker died in our arms. In less than 2 months, we had lost 2 of our children. And once again, we had to go straight to the funeral home. We had to identify our son. We had to pick out that same little urn with just different initials, and we held a service. This time around, we had a few more friends that actually got to meet him in the NICU and get to know him. And right there, that day, my parents flew back to San Diego, and my in-laws back to Nebraska, and a day later, my husband went back to work. And there I was, now with 1 baby, hoping for a miracle that maybe she's gonna survive, and starting the shock of everything wearing off, and the grief just consuming me, and trying to hold it together, and not understanding that why I'm so emotional, why is my husband not? Why is he at work? Why is he at the gym? Why is he living life? Yet he was at the NICU every single morning at 6 a.m. before work. Grief changes a person, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. And in those early days when I couldn't sleep and I would be sobbing silently next to my husband as he slept, I talked to my therapist and I said, when is this gonna get easier? When will I get over this? And she just looked at me and said, you're never gonna get over the loss of a child. You're not gonna get over that grief. Grief sticks with you, but it will change over time and you will learn how to survive. And the same goes for my father. Right after he left, the second time, I received an email. He's much like my husband, who's very stoic and doesn't show emotion. I've seen him cry maybe 5 times in my life. I received a letter, and in it, it said, I am so thankful that you are still with us. I keep thinking of how much you remind me of my mother. This is the highest compliment I could give anyone. And I remember just crying and just realizing it and sinking in that, you know what? That's his way of grieving too. He and my mother almost lost their daughter and their 2 grandchildren. We all grieve differently. Time went on. Our lone survivor is amazing. I'm sure many people have followed her along on social media and everywhere. She's on the face of Children's Miracle Network as well. Peyton is almost 12 years old, perfectly healthy, and she is quite the survivor and miracle. Over time, yes. She would be taking a bow right now. If anyone has met her, she is all that and more. Over the years, the grief has changed, and we've learned. Divorce statistics show, I believe it's something 60 or 70% of parents that endure child loss actually stay together. And for my husband and I, we grew. It took a lot of talking and understanding that, you know what, my husband's way of grieving and dealing with our deaths as well as our survivor is going to be different from me, who wears my heart on my sleeve and openly talks about it here. But little things, as I was looking for that letter this week, I happened to see a note, and this was left on the coffee pot. And this was one of the many, many anniversaries that unfortunately we have to live through, but we also love to live through because they existed. In it, it said, I love you. Make sure to take time for yourself and reflect on the day and think of all the lives that Parker has touched. That's our son. And that was on one of his anniversaries. And that's just how we do it. There are easy years, there are difficult years, but we all grieve some way. And it may not be the same. There is no blueprint for grief. Maybe you are grieving right now the loss of a spouse, or the loss of a child like us, or infertility, or the loss of a friend, or a parent, but we all are grieving some way. And I want to leave you with this. The one thing we all have in common is that grief shows us that we loved. And I hope that you're like me, finding that path, and someday you will find, maybe it's today, maybe it's happened, maybe it'll be a year from now, but you'll find that grief and happiness can coexist. Thank you.